烟台 LG 的公司解散了，不是因为破产。
LG has shut down in Yantai, but it's not because of bankruptcy. They moved their operations to a factory in Vietnam, and over 1,400 people are now facing unemployment. LG was one of the leading Korean-invested companies and offered some of the best benefits for foreign companies. The compensation given is quite generous. Executives who have been there for over 10 years might receive up to nearly 100,000 yuan. Employees have said they've been receiving gift cards from a local store, and it's hard for them to let go. They originally planned to work there for their whole lives, but now they're all lining up to get their severance pay, thinking about finding jobs after the new year. But with the current situation, can the job market even absorb over 1,000 people? Small local businesses in Yantai, be careful. Business might get even tougher next year with more competitors entering the scene.
Hey, LG is pulling out of Yantai Market. The last buses are leaving. 3 47-seat Zongtong buses. This is the last commuter ride.
On December 31st, 2025, Korea's LG Group announced the closure of its LG display factory in Yantai. All equipment was removed, and over 1,400 employees received severance pay and left. Employees who worked for about 10 years got around 60,000 to 70,000 yuan, while team leaders got around 120,000 yuan. The factory was built in 2010 and was the largest foreign invested company in Yantai at the time. At its peak, there were over 10,000 employees, producing phone screens for companies like Apple, Samsung, and Xiaomi. When this factory closed, it had a huge impact. The most affected were the thousands of workers. The factory also supported logistics, catering, and cleaning industries, with around 50 to 60,000 people relying on it. Now, thousands of people have lost their jobs, and local restaurants, delivery services, and small stores are seeing fewer orders. Most employees were between 20 to 40 years old, and their families depended on this steady income. Finding another job like this is nearly impossible. An employee who worked at the Yantai LG factory for 8 years said that the hardest part isn't the money, but the sudden loss of direction. Before, every day was structured, with co-workers around, and something to look forward to. Now they're just scrolling through job apps at home and finding fewer positions that suit them. His son just started middle school, and with school fees, tutoring, and uniforms, the pressure is huge. The closure of the Yantai factory is part of LG Display's global strategic contraction and restructuring. Previously, LG Display had already sold its Guangzhou factory to China's TCL Huaxing, officially exiting the Chinese LCD panel business. On the same day, a sudden notice at the workshop of Dongdu Electronics in Guangzhou made the machines come to a halt. The shutdown notice from Dongdu Electronics clearly stated, due to market changes, increased industry competition, and a continuous decline in orders, the company faces huge operational difficulties. Despite many efforts, the situation cannot be reversed. Dongdu Electronics, established in 2008, is a wholly owned subsidiary of South Korea's Dongdu Electronics Corp., specializing in producing TFT LCD display materials for LG's display division. This medium-sized manufacturer has 763 employees. It has always been closely linked to the strategic layout of its parent company, LG. With the closure of LG's Yantai factory, Dongdu Electronics has lost its foundation for existence. In stark contrast, LG's business in Vietnam is thriving. LG has 3 factories in Vietnam, including production bases for subsidiaries like LG Innotek and LG Display. In 2024, 3 core LG factories in Vietnam generated a total revenue of $10.3 billion, marking a 9.6% year-on-year growth. The revenue of LG Display's Haiphong factory in Vietnam skyrocketed by 41.8%, with after-tax profit soaring by 57.5%. However, LG continues to expand its production base in Vietnam, receiving a $1 billion capital increase approval in November 2024. Now, China's position as the world's factory is gradually being replaced. This is not just an economic loss, but also a weakening of its national strategic position. In recent years, several large Korean companies have pulled out of China. Hanwha Q Cells shut down its solar cell and module factory in Qidong on June 30th, 2024. It completely exited by 2025, with production shifting to the United States. Hyundai has sold several factories in China between 2021 and 2023, including plants in Beijing, Chongqing, and Hangzhou. In 2025, Hyundai continues to reduce remaining capacity, with sales struggling and market share at only around 1–2%. Samsung Electronics began its de-China strategy as early as 2020, including closing its smartphone, TV, and PC factories in China. By 2025, it focused on further reducing semiconductor back-end operations or inventory adjustments, with no news of new factory openings or closures. Recently, the high-end Korean skincare brand Aura announced its withdrawal from the Chinese market. What's striking is that it took less than 5 months from its official entry into China to its decision to exit. This rapid exit far exceeds the typical market cultivation period recognized by the industry. According to a report by the Korean Industry Research Institute Beijing branch, as of January 14, 2026, 32.4% of South Korean companies in China expect to withdraw, relocate, or reduce their business within the next 5 years. Among them, 9.7% plan to exit the Chinese market directly, 1.8% plan to relocate to other countries, and 20.9% are considering scaling down. In contrast, 48.6% of Korean companies said they expect to maintain the status quo. From an industry perspective, the most pessimistic outlooks are in the display panel, mobile, home appliance, wholesale retail, and distribution sectors, while heavy equipment and shipbuilding industries are relatively optimistic about future development. Many South Korean companies in China indicated that the decision to withdraw or relocate is primarily driven by increased competition in the Chinese market, rising production costs, and pressure from business succession and long-term operations. Southeast Asia is the primary destination for relocation, accounting for 59%, with 17% choosing to return to South Korea. In China, many familiar Japanese brands are also quietly exiting the market. Mitsubishi Motors' exit is the most symbolic. Once the engine king, Mitsubishi sales in China were once booming. But as China strongly pushed EVs, its market share plummeted. Ultimately, in July 2025, Mitsubishi closed its Chenzhou vehicle factory and ended its joint venture in Shenyang for engine production, bidding farewell to the Chinese automotive stage. Nissan also pressed the stop button at its Wuhan factory. Despite a multi-billion-dollar investment and plans for annual output of 300,000 vehicles, the factory's actual output was less than 10,000 units, with a capacity utilization rate of only 3%. Amid the EV wave, Nissan's traditional gas-powered vehicles struggled. In the chemical industry, Mitsui Chemicals decided in June 2025 to exit its joint venture with Sinopec. This move reflects the strategic contraction of Japanese chemical companies amidst the sluggish real estate market in China. In the office equipment industry, Konica Minolta closed its Wuxi factory, laying off about 1,400 workers. Canon's Zhongshan factory also shut down in November 2025, closing the plant that had been in operation for 24 years, with production capacity shifting to Vietnam and Thailand. At the same time, Japan's dairy giant Yakult is also retreating from China as its sales plummeted, leading to factory closures. In December 2024, Yakult's headquarters dissolved its Shanghai subsidiary, Yakult China Dairy Products Company. A year later, in November 2025, it further reduced its capacity by closing its first factory in Guangzhou. Apart from these manufacturing giants, Japanese retail and service industries are also accelerating their exit in 2025. Convenience store brands like 7-Eleven and Lawson, restaurant chains like Yoshinoya, and heavy machinery giants like Komatsu and Hitachi have suspended or closed some stores and factories in China in the past 2 years. According to a survey by a business consulting firm, from March 2023 to March 2025, over 2,000 Japanese-controlled businesses in China paused or ceased operations, accounting for 9.3% of all Japanese enterprises. Among these were large companies with registered capital exceeding 100 million yuan. These exits often involved asset sales or equity transfers. Moreover, geopolitical tensions have accelerated the departure of Japanese companies. By the end of 2025, the Japan-China diplomatic crisis escalated, with Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's remarks on Taiwan sparking the crisis. This was followed by a new wave of Japanese companies pulling out. A survey published by Reuters on January 15th showed that more than 2/3 of Japanese companies expect tense relations between the two companies to impact the economy, with nearly half of the companies already experiencing or expecting direct operational effects. The survey showed that about 9% of the surveyed companies said their business has already been impacted, while 35% expect varying degrees of disruption. An executive from an electronics manufacturing company said that China's movements on key mineral policies are a matter of life and death for the company. The survey also showed that about 43% per term they will have to reassess their business operations in China. A manager from a transportation equipment manufacturing company noted that if Japanese automakers face a slump in sales in China, their company sales will also drop, potentially leading to an exit from the Chinese market. It's not just South Korea and Japan. With the intensifying geopolitical risks and the global supply chain restructuring, multinational companies are reducing their reliance on China. Many are withdrawing or scaling back their businesses in China, shifting production capacity or investments to countries like Mexico, Southeast Asia, and India. In January 2026, IKEA announced the closure of 7 stores in China, including its Baoshan store in Shanghai. Previously, Starbucks announced that it would transfer part of its China market operations to a local capital company, and foreign giants like Microsoft, Amazon, and Citibank have also been laying off employees and shutting down businesses in China. Behind these desperate attempts to survive is the stark reality of foreign businesses being trapped in the Chinese market. This has resulted in factory slowdowns, layoffs, and a huge impact on local employment stability. According to official Chinese government data, from 2018 to 2023, the number of employees in foreign-invested companies in China decreased by about 7.8 million. This trend continued into 2024 and 2025. The groups most affected by this are frontline manufacturing workers and some R&D and management positions, with the impact also spreading to upstream and downstream supply chains, such as logistics and catering. From January to November 2025, the actual foreign direct investment in China amounted to 693 billion yuan, approximately $99 billion, a 7.5% year-on-year decrease, continuing the trend of negative growth since May 2023. During the same period, foreign companies' fixed asset investments dropped by 14.1%, directly leading to a reduction in new jobs in both the manufacturing and service sectors. Manufacturing powerhouses like Guangdong, Jiangsu, and Shandong were the hardest hit, with thousands of workers suddenly unemployed. Supply chain disruptions have pushed small and medium-sized suppliers to the brink of bankruptcy. In some large cities in China, more and more people have been seen sleeping in parks, under bridges, under overpasses, and at subway exits. And even more shocking is that the homeless in China are becoming increasingly younger, with 61% of the homeless being under 33, while only 25% are over 60. Data shows that by the end of May 2025, about 21.4 million people in China were homeless, a 5.3-fold increase from 2020. A netizen in Zhejiang noticed someone curled up in a pavilion in a park overnight. Bridges, parks, greenbelts, and back doors of shopping malls are becoming temporary homes for more and more unemployed. In Guangzhou, some underpasses have become overnight spots for delivery workers. For them, renting a place for over 1,000 yuan a month is too expensive, so they'd rather sleep under an overpass in a cardboard box and save money to send home. In Beijing, the main areas for sleeping outside are at train stations, station squares, underground passages, and overpasses. Unlike Guangzhou and Shenzhen, the homeless in Beijing are more diverse in identity, including unemployed white-collar workers, migrant workers, job seekers, petitioners from other regions, and bankrupt vendors.
Being poor is so hard. I can't afford a house, and when I sleep under the bridge, people tell me to leave. Yesterday, an old man came and told me not to sleep here, even threatening to have someone beat me if I didn't leave.
You see, one person is sleeping over there, and another one here. It's so hard to make money now. I just came from over there, and on the way here, I couldn't even bring myself to look for a hotel because it's too expensive. Tonight, I have no choice but to sleep under this overpass here. Look, it's so cold here. Really, I have no choice. I don't have a penny left. I'm cold and hungry, and I haven't eaten in a day or two.
There are many homeless people living here. They sleep here to save on rent. It's still early, and they haven't woken up yet. The weather's been a little colder these days. I wonder how they manage to sleep here at night. Recently, it's been quite peaceful, but in Shanghai, many of us have lost our jobs, and we can't find work anywhere. I think this is like a pressure cooker on the move. Its lid's been welded down. On the surface, it seems calm, but I personally think the explosion is coming faster and faster.
The man in the video warns that today's Chinese society is like a pressure cooker, ready to explode at any moment. The tension at the bottom of society is growing stronger. This metaphor is not just a personal experience, but a profound reflection of the current state of society. Once, China was hailed as the engine of global economic growth, attracting vast amounts of foreign capital, with factories rising and cities lighting up with activity. The middle class sprang up like mushrooms after the rain. However, in the past 2 years, this engine has completely stalled. Foreign investment is fleeing, factory doors are being shut, and the promised deepened reforms can no longer convince savvy foreign investors. They no longer believe in the grand narratives and have chosen to pull out completely. The restructuring of supply chains away from China has evolved from a slogan to a harsh reality. The middle class is rapidly falling under pressure. Countless workers who have spent their lives struggling suddenly realize that they have not only lost their jobs, but also their foothold in survival. This shift is not sudden, but the concentrated eruption of structural contradictions that have been accumulating over the years. Geopolitical tensions, trade barriers, intensified domestic competition, and the Chinese Communist Party's policy changes have all intertwined, dragging the economy into a quagmire. China's ability to withstand pressure is approaching a critical point, with increasing protests becoming the most direct signal. According to data from Freedom House's China Dissent Monitoring Project, 1,392 protests were recorded in the third quarter of 2025, a 45% increase compared to the same period in 2024. The total number of protests for the year exceeded 5,000, marking a 48% increase. These protests were mainly concentrated in populous and industrially dense provinces like Guangdong, Henan, Hunan, Hebei, and Shandong. The core issues are real estate disputes and land appropriation. Worker strikes and rights protection actions accounted for 38%, property owner protests accounted for 29%, and rural land expropriation protests accounted for 15%. Many protests stem from unpaid wages after factory closures, with export-oriented enterprises collapsing in large numbers due to U.S. tariffs, triggering worker demonstrations. Looking ahead to 2026, China may face a deep social crisis, similar to that of Iran's. Economic growth is stagnating. Social protests are frequent, and the government is relying on heavy-handed stability maintenance rather than reform, ultimately forming a vicious cycle. Discontent among the lower classes and anxiety in the middle class will evolve into a broader political unrest.